I can't be the only one that loves to hear stories about, drum corps from the past. Like, I love those stories. And anytime I get to talk to somebody about any, where did the baby elephant walk come from? Or how did the troopers start to do this thing? Or like, to me, it's all really, really interesting because I'm a drum corps fan.
Yeah, I was in Blessed Sacrament School, and Father Gardner came around in 1950 and said, you're going to be in this drum and bugle corps we're starting. And that's when I joined, and I left in December of 1958 and came back again while I was in the Air Force in June of 1959 and finished out that season.
I started way back in 52. John Lenhart and I grew up together on the same block, and we were the first ones allowed into the Corps that were not part of Blessed Sacrament School. We were a brotherhood. We lived together. We worked with each other. Bill Lundy came into my basement in town when Ron Sertikowski had to drop out. Bill Lundy came and he and I worked together. This was all due to a man that we should be so proud of, Bishop Robert Garner.
This is Jerry Dalton. I was in the Golden Knights from September 1952 through the 1963 season. Lundy and I were altar boy partners too. We worked together pretty well. Like to practice together. It was a tight organization.
Jerry is one of 3 people who marched in all 9 national championships. The other 2 guys, unfortunately, are deceased, was Dick Burns and Ray Lenhart.
Hi, folks. This is Bill Lundy. I joined the Squires in 1953 and was on the field several contests in 57 when Ron Sertikowski unfortunately had to leave. And, of course, was on from 1957 through the 1964 season. Arguably one of the best drum lines, certainly during the era. Had a great career with this corps, and many of us owe lots to Bishop Garner and our staff that helped us.
Jack Boyko. I went to Blessed Sacrament School when, at that time, Father Garner would come in and say, you, and you come down and be in the drum corps. And I had already been playing the trumpet. So in 1957, I got into the Squires, and Bill Hayes took me up into the Golden Knights at the end of 57 to be a substitute to go down to Miami on a train, which my mother forbid completely. Started marching in the Corps in 1958, marched till 1965, rejoined the Corps in 1968 as one of the horn instructors, and stayed with them till the Corps broke up. It's always been something that's been in my blood. It will always be in my blood. The Golden Knights had taught me how to be a brother, how to be compassionate, and to hate Garfield.
Yes, indeed.
Rich Jones out here in Sedona, Arizona. I was a substitute in 62, came in with a lot of luck, found Tommy Bach on a bus, and he got me into the color guard. So I'd been in a couple corps before that, and to be in Blessed Sacrament was unbelievable. So I marched in the guard for a couple of years, and then they realized I couldn't do anything, so they made me drum major in 66 and 67. And I get in and lead the alumni corps when I can, when they let me slip in. I'm still on the field, but I'm taking pictures for DCI, DCA, and Drum Corps World. And I was in Florida Brass as well as drum major. So yeah, I've been around. It's been my life since probably I was 8 years old.
My name is Eric Schweikert, and I joined the Golden Knights at the end of the 67 season. My first competing year was 68, and I marched until the Corps disbanded in 73. At the end, I was the personnel manager. Unfortunately, that didn't help a whole lot because we didn't have any personnel. The problem was we just didn't seem to draw enough interest in the Corps to continue. Always a wonderful experience. Wouldn't trade it for the world.
Well, Eric and I were new guys together. That's what we called rookies. I marched in full season 68, 69, 70. Was a substitute in 71. And I was working with Bill Hayes had come back, and I was working to try to reinvigorate the Squires in Union, New Jersey. Helped out a little bit in 72 during the winter while they were learning the 72 repertoire. And then I've taught the alumni corps.
Yeah, my name is Thomas Brown. I started school at Blessed Sacrament in 1964. I immediately joined the Squires, was in there for 4 years, took 1968 off. 69, I went to the big corps. I played bass drum my first year, rudimental bass my second year, and snare my last 2 years with the corps. My only goal in life was to be a Golden Knight. So everything I did after that was like icing on the cake. So my goal was met, and I couldn't have been happier. And 74 and 75, I went to the Santa Clara Vanguard, where I won a national championship.
When I was in a horn line with Sac, Eddie Wyra used to get so upset with us because we were always drumming. Bobby Thompson was one hell of a guy, and he came to watch us play a few times with him. He used to say, "Bill, what'd you do with your left hand?" I said, "Well, it's a little bit different with this style of drumming."
Joe Porter and I were 15-year-old kids. We took 4 buses to go to the Yonkers racetrack when Bobby Thompson insisted I compete against the standstill guys. That was Frank Arsenal and all those guys. And, you know, we carried this heavy drum on 4 buses. I kid you not. 4 buses we took to Yonkers racetrack so I could compete with using Bobby Thompson's Sons of Liberty's drum. Jack McAuliffe was the business manager for Hawthorne Caballeros. And we borrowed 4 uniforms from the Hawthorne Caballeros, and it was our drum quartet. It was Ronnie Sertikowski, Joe Porter, and I on snare, and Walter Smith on bass drum. And we competed against the seniors, and we won the gold medals. Well, it didn't sit right with them. At the next time we met in the basement, Bishop Garner had us stand up, and he said, "You know, I'm here to create character. I don't want characters." Anyway, we had to give back the gold medals. But we felt good. We beat the seniors. Thanks to Bobby Thompson. God. You know, again, Bishop Garner was bright enough and kind enough to hire the right people, Bill Hayes and Bobby Thompson.
People don't realize we used to have individual contests during the course of the winter almost every week. Yeah. And I don't think that they don't do that anymore. I mean, right around just the Newark area, we had all these drum corps. A lot of people would go compete against each other. It was a lot of fun. Everybody knew everybody. You know, and when you talk about brotherhood, there's a brotherhood with a whole lot of the corps we hated years later when you meet these guys. When I played with the Golden Knights Alumni Corps, Bedbug, who was his nickname, he was in Vinny's. I remember tackling him when we played football against those guys. we didn't fight anymore, but we knocked the out of each other playing football in the wintertime.
Yeah. So the fathers who helped out, a lot of help. We had a lot of help from the mothers who helped out with uniforms.
A year, everybody in the Corps wanted to win. That's all we thought about was winning. We never liked this second and third place stuff. So we started beating all the Philadelphia corps and the Pennsylvania corps in '53, and it went on from there. It's just determination of a bunch of kids that wanted to be good.
Who were the competitors back then?
St. Denny's, St. Joe's. Back in
The
the
Fellow Musketeers,
Holy Name Cadets.
Liberty Bell, Audubon.
St. Mary's Dudley.
Chicago Cavaliers.
St. Kevin's Emerald Knights. The Madison Scouts. The YMCA Kilties.
The pastor of St. Mary's told Bill Hayes and Bobby Thompson they had to make a choice between St. Mary or Blessed Sacrament. Lucky for us, he picked us.
Ford, Washington, we sat and watched them all. We had already competed. We already got our scores, and we beat them all. When we went out to Los Angeles and didn't know anybody out there, and nobody knew who we were.
Yeah.
And we walked away with it.
That was 1956?
56.
And the junior corps that won the nationals always gave an exhibition at a senior corps show. And that was a thrill. Down in Florida, it was the Orange Bowl.
I was in college then. Bishop Gardner, he was kind enough to fly me to Florida for the weekend to compete. Mr. Mullen was his name.
Right.
He was a drum judge. And when we completed that show in Miami, he liked us. He really did. He looked at me and he smiled with the thumbs up, meaning you guys won it again.
I know the Corps won nationals through 56, competitive in 57, but did not win the titles that year. 58 came out and with a 20-1 record. A lot of things changed.
We had new uniforms, which were quite different from the old black and white, black shoes, and came out with white on the white shoes, new gold stripe with white striped bands.
Getson came out with the big baritones with the big bells. None of the drum corps were using them yet. And we got a whole set of those horns.
I had a conversation in the early 2000s with Sal Ferreira from the Cavaliers, who was their horn instructor in the 50s and 60s. And he said he modeled his arrangements after 1958 Blessed Sacrament. Sonorous, lower brass, and all of that was just remarkable for the era.
We did a dance on the field.
Mm-hmm.
We did come to the Mardi Gras, and nobody did that.
We did a samba.
Whatever the hell it was, a cha-cha. And of course, everybody followed suit a few years later. But at that time, that was a little new. And you say, what happened in 58? In 58, we came out with a new look, a new sound, a new type of drill, and a better attitude.
And won everything that year.
Yes, we did.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
He didn't understand what we were doing, and he killed us in marching and maneuvering. And that was enough to dump us into second place to Vinny's. The only contest we lost, but we still have a 20-1 record.
My understanding was this cross-through drill was something that wasn't done before. We were marching in squads most of the time. And this was sort of the first sort of follow the leader with two lines crossing through each other.
And in arcular formation. If we would have just done a cross-through straight through, we ended up on a 20-yard line on the other side. So it started and it crossed through. So it stayed on the 50 and then straightened out. And Ralph Silverbrand, who was the judge, looked and thought that the course should have been doing straight lines on that follow through, cross through. And he just took everyone from being out of line. And after that, I think Bill Hayes went and screamed in every marching judge's ear, saying, you got to look at the whole thing, not just everybody's got to be behind each other. And I talked to Ralph about that when I marched in Hawthorne. And he said he had no clue what that was supposed to be and thought it was supposed to be straight lines and ticked it as a judge would.
People used to say about us, especially in 58, well, that's not drum corps. They don't seem to realize that drum corps kept progressing all the time. It was corps like SAC and, Cavaliers and some of those Midwestern corps that have really moved it to where it is.
By the way, our uniforms, 2 full sets of them, were made by my mom, Mrs. Burns, Mrs. Boyle, Mrs. Interdonato, if I remember correctly. They had a little sweatshop set up, and they made 2 sets of uniforms for us. And Eddie mentioned earlier about the parents who helped us so much. And nowadays, I can't imagine the cooperation needed by adults to put a corps on the field with. Our drum line in the Squires in 1953, 54, 55 was very good. We had our share of talent. And to Bob Thompson's credit, he had us come to practice with the big corps, as we used to call it, for 2 years before we had to march. We were very, very ready. In fact, and Eddie might remember this, in some parades, the Squires marched for somebody, and then they rushed us back to the big corps, and we were the second drum line. In fact, there's a picture in 56 marching into the Coliseum, which is something to behold. And you'll notice there are two drum lines, and the little guys, us, were behind Eddie, Joe, and Ron, and Gary Carlton, and Bill Sisson, and Jake. When 58 came, we all were in the same class. So we grew up together. We had been playing since the 5th grade. Jerry Barrett, who played tenor, was as good as Ricky and I. And we had another guy by the name of Harry Stahl. He was as good as anybody. Bobby Thompson, he was so gifted. He just recognized talent, and boy, could he teach. I mean, his technique was, to this day, if I pick up a pair of sticks, my hands are in what I think are the correct position for his technique. And in fact, anybody who we're taught by Bobby Thompson, you look at their left hand, they're all the same. Bobby Thompson, Les Parks, look at it, the technique, and you could sort of guess who was taught.
First job, 1952, St. Patrick's Day, Galway Bay. First song the corps played out in public, the parade in Newark.
I loved St. Patrick's Day because Bishop Garner got us out of school.
They got us out of school to go to the Nationals, too.
Can you see the difference between DCI corps today and what this corps, Blessed Sacrament, went through in the 50s, where the mothers made their uniforms? I mean, we had a bread truck, for an equipment truck. So, and it was a close-knit group. Most of them were from the Blessed Sacrament School. Can't you see the difference between these guys talking and what they went through, and the mega money that all the DCI corps have now?
Bishop Garner would never tell me where he got the money.
I was just going to say that, Ed. He had to have a benefactor. We know that, but I mean, how can you take 60 guys to California for 3 weeks? Who would even think of doing that?
I wish every teenager in the country could have a national championship. And I don't care if it's in sailing, but whether it's softball or baseball or Little League, to be a national champion, I still remember it. Very few contests in 54, 55, 56 that our drum line was not number one. We were almost always high drum score, thanks to Bobby Thompson.
62 was another pivotal year in terms of introducing some changes to percussion and all.
Bobby Thompson decided to give rudimental bass a try because we used it in the drum quartet. I can remember the practice when he brought it up and we all just rolled our eyes. It was just not traditional. And up to that point, it was, your traditional drum line was a 9-person drum line. I don't have to tell you what was in it. But boy, when we came out with rudimental bass, it just, Bobby Thompson wrote drum parts that were very musical, for lack of a better word, very complimentary to the horn line. And I think we had an exceptional baritone through the years. I mean, if you listen to our BS's recordings, I think we had a better than average baritone section.
The guys that were in there, we're trying to Boyle Brothers.
Yeah.
Jimmy
No.
O'Day. I mean, come on, these guys are great players.
They were exceptional.
Blessed Sacrament was head over heels in sound, in smoothness. I mean, it was just amazing.
Still have the original recording. I have a box of records here. Timmy O'Brien's Ear.
The national champ. He won the individual DFW in Miami in '61.
Tim, have you heard that album, Bugles Up?
Oh, but I tell you, I would love to.
That'll put it to your ears how good Blessed Sacrament was compared to Garfield, Chicago, and St. Kevin's.
Okay, so you guys have been talking a lot about drums, but I haven't heard a lot. Can you tell me what was it about the horn line that made it different? Can you guys give me any idea of what they were doing or how they were teaching or anything like that?
We practiced every day.
Just the amount of practice.
Bill Hayes, I mean, he was a hell of a horn player to begin with. And he would come around and you would have to know your parts, or else he'd make you look stupid. And everybody memorized their stuff. And there was one time we had this guy, Norman Jupa. And Bill Hayes comes up to him and says, "Norman, take the marbles out of your mouth." And he actually did. True story. He thought that put marbles in his mouth, he could play better. I mean,
John Lenhart went in the Army. John Lenhart had his upper right central incisor was fractured when we were playing around when we were kids. And a dentist in the Army said, "I'm going to fix that tooth for you." So he made a normal looking central incisor for John. John came out of service. He said, Ed, by then I was a dentist. He said, "Ed, sure, I'm not playing the same anymore." I said, "John, we'll go back to the way your tooth used to be." So I made him a crown that looked like it was fractured, and he was happy as a lark.
They belonged to the drum corps being a gang.
That's basically the way I always described the drum corps. It was a gang that knew how to play horns that was sponsored by the church. If you mess with one of us, you mess with all of us. That was where we lived. That was the attitude of the city at that point in our life. I remember that.
That's why we started playing football against Vinny's and Garfield in those corps instead of fighting at these shows. I mean, it got out of hand where guys were just punching the hell out of each other from two drum corps that hated each other. But for what reason? Because that's the way we were growing up in those days. So the drum corps pulled us away and we decided, well, we can play football. We can hit them just as hard.
Jump ahead a little bit to like 64 to 64, 65. My understanding is things changed significantly at that point because the changes in the city, and it was the first real influx of people from New York and outside of the parish.
Getting this cadre of kids from all these different smaller corps into the Golden Knight way of doing it was hard. They weren't used to practicing as much as we did. They weren't used to making sure they made every practice. There were kids that would miss contests because they went to the movies with their girlfriends. That's what happened in those years, and it kind of took away from the Golden Knights as the Golden Knights. Mm-hmm. Going a little further than that, a lot of guys got drafted. Yes. And that cadre of people, left for a while, and it made putting a corps on the field, good competitive, very, very hard. I give those young people very, very much credit for putting it on as good as they did. But boy, I tell you, going through that was hard for me, being in the corps in 1958, 59, 60, where, hey, everybody came all the time, practice, you knew your part. And as you said, you learned your part, you knew your part, you memorized your part, and you played as one person in your section.
After 63, a lot of the original guys left. They aged out, started with a lot of new guys.
But Ricky and I were able to stay, and we had an all-new tenor line. They were all three new guys. See, we had one rudimental bass left. Brian stayed 64. And I guess that's when Tony Seepy came aboard. And Dick Burns started teaching that year. And Dick, a dear friend of mine, really became a very accomplished arranger in the next couple of years. But that was his first year. It went all from neighborhood kids. And then as 64, 65, 66, guys were from 4 different states. I mean, they were from all over the place.
We won every national with 27 horns. It's unheard of today.
Wait. I want to ask you, Richard, was that, are you saying you were smaller than most other groups?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And that
what was the average size of the other groups?
At least 36 horns.
36.
Yeah.
Cavaliers carried 36.
Yeah,
At that time, Kevin's carried 36. Garfield had almost, I think they had 42 in one year.
exactly.
Yeah, they were bigger.
Yep. So we had a small corps, and Father Gardner made sure it stayed that way. Because
You couldn't hide. You screwed up, everybody knew it.
And we were taught, even in my era, that if you're gonna make a mistake, do a damn good job of it. And it was really the kind of training a musician gets, something goes wrong, you keep going and you just carry on. 66 Corps was relatively small as well and had that great experience at the 66 Dream.
see this smile? It's still on. We beat Chicago Cavaliers. It was great. I had every contest. I needed a bigger shake. The 66 Corps, I think we had 33 horns, but it was very clean, and we were making a comeback. 64, we went downhill a little bit. 65, a little better. 66, 67. We were building back up. And the 66 Corps, it was very clean. 67 was even cleaner.
67 is a great show.
Yes, yes. I like the drill, Vinnie Radford drill. When did Vinnie come in? When did he start?
67.
67, okay.
Before
And we had
that was
Frank Kubenak before that.
Kubenak, yeah.
Jack Stecker, then Kubenak.
Another milestone is 66 was the first year that a drumline came out with 5 snares and 5 tenors. 5 and 5, and was very successful with it. But everybody followed. It was just like with the rudimental bass, right? The next year, everybody had them.
The 69 Corps was better than the 68 Corps. The 70 Corps was better than both of them together. We had young people like Eric, join the Corps around that time, that 67, 68 time, and the Corps was really good.
I joined the Corps at the end of 67. I think it was in September. Went down and I had quite a few fellows with me from the little Corps that we were in, the C.W. Townsmen, with Joey Ross, Tony Ross, Kenny Stein, Chucky Stoltz, a couple other fellows who lasted a few rehearsals but didn't come back. We auditioned, and then Dick said we passed the audition, and we went in and sat down. The 5 of us that made the horn line that day, there were a total of 11 horns.
Oh,
And we kind of looked at one another and said, what the hell did we do?
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the first rehearsal. And then as the year progressed, more and more guys started to dwindle in, and from all over the place, actually. And some of the older members from the year before did come back.
4 or 5 of us came up from the shore at the same time.
That's right. That's right. And at one point in time, I heard a statistic that we fielded, I think it was 42 horns when all was said and done. At one point in time, we had 80 horn players come through the Corps who came in, tried out, sat a few rehearsals, and never came back. So I don't know what the problem was there, whether they were afraid of the culture, whether they were afraid of the amount of work that was required, or the commitment that we all made to make sure we got to every rehearsal, learned our parts, did the best we possibly could to make the Corps the best we possibly could. And competing wise, that year wasn't all that successful. We lost the first 7 shows, and then we went to the VFW States in Wildwood and we won. Strange thing, but we put together a show that day that was good enough to win. The rest of the year was kind of off and on, good, bad, a couple of wins here and there. But what we learned was the commitment and the time and the dedication that it took to be a Golden Knight, which is the best thing that we could have accomplished. And we fit right in. The guys that joined with me that day, they still play in the alumni corps. Most of the people that I've met back then, I've been friends with for over 50 years. Jack being one of them, Gary for sure. And I remember being in the Blessed Sacrament School the first year I played French horn. and Jack would call his section rehearsals and took us upstairs to practice our parts and learn the proper technique. And it was by the end of the year, we were very well acclimated to being and doing what it took to be a Golden Knight.
Is if I didn't know where you came from when you joined the Corps, you're a Golden Knight. If I knew that you were from the Woodsiders because you said I'm from the Woodsiders all the time, you were never really a Golden Knight. And those people didn't last long. The cult of being a Golden Knight, the gang, being that member, always looking out for each other, even now.
And that's what a lot of potential members or some of the people who ask about the Corps, they don't get. They just cannot grasp that whole concept as to how dedicated we were to one another and to the achievement that was possible by being in the best drum corps around. We worked hard, we played hard, but the drum corps was the most important thing to us. And consequently, those guys that came in '68 and hung around and put in the hard work and everything else were the building blocks for the '69 and '70 Corps, which were outstanding, I thought.
You know, I started out in the Squires in '64, and as I mentioned earlier, my only goal was to wear the black and gold. I didn't care about anything else. I just wanted to wear that uniform. So, you know, as a rookie, you know, I got the foot in the butt many a times from Tony CP and a few other guys, but it was part of being a Golden Knight. That was all part of the process.
I will say this about you, Tom. It's 1970. We had just the most outstanding pair of rudimental bass drummers from 62 onward. And in 69, after the 69 season, Don Interdonato went into the service, and Tony Seppi, who was the other one, he worked with you, and you listened to the 1970 record and you would swear it was Tony and Don.
Thank you for that. You know, Tony didn't know I was in the Squires. He didn't know I could play all of my rudiments. I could have played snare in '70, but like I said, I was just happy to be a Golden Knight. My first parade with the Squires, I carried the toolbox down Broad Street because I was too small to put on a drum.
So we had some interesting things in '69. We won the prelims in the American Legion Nationals. Cavaliers bested us in the finals. We seem to be always back and forth with the Cavaliers. But through that part of the '60s, as everybody knows, they were kind of dominating, you know. And then in '70 was the thing everybody talks about, and don't want to get into the controversy, but we won the prelims in the World Open in 1970, and then we're edged out by the Troopers in the finals. So that was a disappointment, but we had a great corps. We had absolutely great corps.
We did.
We were in Miami and we did a good job. Unfortunately, it wasn't quite good enough. And the Corps was a little down because we thought we had done well enough, but the judges thought otherwise, and we didn't get the scores we needed. But the trick was the next morning we got on the bus, stopped. The first time we stopped was in Jacksonville, Florida, at a rest stop. And then the next time we stopped, we were awakened by the soap suds going across the window of the buses because we had stopped in the decamped garage in Clifton to clean up the buses and to gas up again. And then it was from there straight through to Boston. So it was quite an arduous trip, but you know, we got to the World Open, and the basic thought in everybody's mind was, let's just go out there and do the best we possibly can and show these blank, blank, blank what we're all about and who the Golden Knights really are. And we turned on a hell of a performance that night.
I can remember what it felt like during that show. I'm saying to myself, oh my God, I don't think this horn line is getting hit at all, you know? And I think we scored in execution like 19.7 out of 20 was the execution score on the old tick system.
Yeah, it was a great horn job, great marching job, great drum job.
The sponsorship from the church had waned. The racial unrest around the country in 1967 just deterred a lot of people from coming into Newark.
I think the 67 riots made a huge impact on the people that we were able to get into the Corps. Because as you say, nobody really wanted to go into Newark because you didn't know if you could get out. We had a rehearsal once out in the lot behind the school, the parking lot. And we had to stop because they were throwing bottles over the fence at us.
Yeah.
Bottles breaking all around us. So we had to get back inside the school so as not to get hit.
And if you remember, we occasionally had a parade or a contest during the day. We parked our cars in the lot. We came back and wheels were missing. And
At the Blessed Sacrament School, we were doing a portion of the drill. We actually had gunfire going over our heads. We had to stop. 67.
yeah.
Yeah, it was rough.
Well, I was 15 when I came up. The only reason my father let me go into Newark from the Jersey Shore was he knew of Blessed Sacrament Church in Newark. The only reason was because it was connected with the church.
I think at the end of 70, we had what I would call a
mass exodus.
I remember at the end of the Wildwood Parade for the Legion States in September, virtually every horn that the Corps owned that should have been in the possession of members was on the truck, which is not a good sign because normally the guys took their horns home with it. This was going to be something rather difficult to bounce back from. But we started rehearsals, and at that time, I think we moved to Union, and we got some new members, admittedly very green. They didn't have a clue as to what it was to be a Golden Knight or really what they were going to be in for. And we also didn't have enough guys to man the color guard. And we had to do something. So at that time, it was decided, much to the chagrin of the guys in the Corps, that we needed to add young ladies for the color guard. So it wasn't terribly well received. And I mean, I give the girls a lot of credit because some of the stuff they had to put up with when they came down the first few times. But eventually they were assimilated and they weren't given any preferential treatment. If they screwed up, they got a kick in the butt, just like the guys used to. But it all worked out in terms of finally putting a Corps on the field. The only problem, as it turns out, was we were perhaps a little premature in going to the total show concept. Especially with The King and I, it wasn't terribly well received, although it was decent arrangements by Dick and everything else, but it just didn't come across.
This came from Don Angelica convincing Dick Burns as well as Don Warren and others to start doing this total show thing.
Yeah.
So BS did the King and I. Madison Scouts did Alice in Wonderland. The Cavaliers, part of their show, the color guard was dressed as clowns and they were playing a circus tune and they were tumbling, and it drove members out. Number one, people didn't want to go to it. And if you remember, things kind of turned around and went back to more conventional after 71. Not just for the Golden Knights, but for a lot of the corps.
Angelica hoped to get 24 corps only in the whole country to do shows. And the Golden Knights were supposed to be doing the Broadway end of it. And the Garfield was supposed to be doing the military end of it. And the Cavaliers were supposed to be doing, the semi-classical stuff from where they are. And everyone was supposed to do their thing and be judged on it as if it were a Broadway show. On Broadway shows, there's a myriad of everything on Broadway. And, what's the best? The best is the one you want to go see. And this is what he felt that drum corps should evolve to. The Cavaliers moved from Chicago to where they are now. Yeah. We never had a place like that. We moved to Union, and then they asked us to leave because the neighborhood saw a lot of black people that they never seen before. And they said, well, that's making them nervous. And they petitioned the American Legion to throw us out, which is what they did.
Blessed Sacrament was highly integrated for the latter part of the 1960s and into the 70s. That was also a factor because remember, we're right after, Brown versus the Board of Education, Civil Rights Act, all of that stuff is going on. You had the racial turmoil in '67. I mean, there are a lot of anecdotes about racial invectives finding its way into adjudication and so forth.
It was difficult. The school had changed. There weren't a lot of white kids in the school. That dynamic had changed. And someone mentioned earlier that we were like a family. We all stuck together. I want to go back towards '69. We were going in the South, and these rednecks were driving through the parking lot, yelling and screaming, and then every guy came out of their room and, had our back. And they were like, okay, bring it on.
Yeah.
So that was a beautiful thing. And to go from 70 to 71 was like a culture shock for me. The first rehearsal we had, there were like 6 drummers. And Jim Hurley said, can somebody play a 10-count roll? So I said, yeah, I can do that. He said, okay, you're on snare. And I was like, wait a minute. So that's how that went down. But it was a big culture shock for the people who had grown up Golden Knights, seeing all these people coming in, just coming in and not knowing about the culture. No matter what your skin color was, didn't know the gold and black culture.
And we stopped in a town in South Carolina because the bus drivers had us sleep. So in the middle of the night, we're in this town. We had some difficulties with the local authorities, and they basically asked us to get out of town.
Atlanta, we were going to a rehearsal site, and a tractor trailer was coming in the opposite direction, and the mirrors clipped. The next thing we knew,
Yep.
the bus was surrounded by sheriff's cars, and these redneck guys on the bus slapping a billy club and intimidating all the black guys in the Corps. And it was just a really tense thing. And our administration managed to get them off the bus. But if you remember, Earl Barnwell said, okay, from here on out, all the white guys sit by the windows, all the black guys sit in the aisle. 72 was the last year. And although Blessed Sacrament was a founding member of DCI, did not compete in the first championship and then disbanded. So has the dubious distinction of being the only DCI founder to have never marched a DCI championship.
At the US Open, we had to get a certain score for us to move on. And we didn't hit our mark, so that's how I remember that was the end of it.
We had to shoot for a certain number to try to make it worthwhile to move on to the national championships. And we competed, and we didn't even make the finals at the USO. We had an excellent horn line. We had a very, very capable marching corps, big color guard. But unfortunately, and I'm sorry, Tom, the drummers couldn't play their way out of a paper bag.
It had a lot to do with Bobby Thompson stepping away and having other people come in who didn't know. George Tuttle, Tom, didn't George teach the line in 72?
I think his book was totally something that we had never seen before. It was very unconventional.
Right.
And we tried to play this thing, and it wasn't pretty. It was not pretty.
I listen to the YouTubes every once in a while. And of course, I used to play golf with Dick a lot, and we talk drum corps every once in a while. And his comment was probably the 72 horn line was probably the most talented one he ever taught. And I listened to the 72 recording, and honest to God, Tom, the drum line sounds certainly competent.
Earlier, George Tuttle gave us a book that was totally unconventional, like nothing we had never seen before. So it took us a while to get going, and that was part of our early struggle. Tony CP came in it for a while. This guy named Roger from the Woodside. It was like a revolving door for us for percussion. Like we didn't have a face in front of us all the time. And then to get to the George Tuttle book, he wasn't there through the winter to take us through the exercises that would get us accustomed to his style of writing. So that was another thing. It was like we were like lost.
And I remember a show in Wilmington, Delaware, where one of the drum judges walked off the field in a concert. He had zeroed the drum line.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, they had zeroed the drum line, and they told two people, then they told two people. So the judges were kind of putting the drum line in positions that they shouldn't have been in. They were better than the score.
Watch the drum line in the video of 72, and you'll look at the drum judge, and he's just being so aggressive, diving under the drums,
Yeah.
and ticking left and right.
I noticed,
left and right, and I was just like, what?
and you can appreciate this from my background. I was a little too technical, I guess, judging B cores. But the judge that I worked with a couple of times taught me how to judge a drum line.
Yeah.
When you have a drum line that is struggling, write a lot of comments so that you don't hit them as often. I mean, you don't have to hit till you have zero. I mean,
Some of it might have been payback for all the years of being good.
Oh, he said that.
It always occurred to me that there were so many people judging at that point that had been beat to death by Blessed Sacrament over
Right.
20 years that,
yeah.
even if it was not explicit, there's this implicit bias.
It's been such an interesting way that we've worked through all of this. I wonder if we could go around and let each person, here's what the core really meant to me, or here's how it impacted my life, or here's why I'm glad I had this experience.
I had friends for a lifetime. And, to be a national champion, as I said earlier, whatever the endeavor, to be a national champion is special. It was more than a drum and bugle corps. It was a brotherhood that lasted 75 years.
Obviously, the camaraderie is something that's special to each one of us, and I'm sure every corps member in the country has that in their heart. We get together in Wildwood every year, and of course the ranks get smaller and smaller, unfortunately. But I think what drum corps does to you, it teaches you discipline. It teaches you cooperation. Your growth and development while you're in drum corps is just amazing. And some of us were very lucky, like Jerry and I in particular. We saw a couple of transitions of the corps. We were there in the early 50s. I still had the drum pad in the den. I still had drumsticks out. Every once in a while, I walk in there and just play a little bit. That left hand is exactly the same, Gary.
I watch a show today. It kind of makes me realize I was part of what goes on today. The memories come flying back when I watch these corps, and I realize, this is a big family, whether you started in 1950 or you started in 2020. It's all drum corps. And Gary, I think I met you after you were out of BS, but
Yeah.
I know you like a brother because you were part of that. Boyko, you were a little kid when I marched. I remember you as a little kid. I'll be 84 years old and I'm still going strong, and I think it's because of drum corps.
Yeah, I was a kid, and all of us probably, we lived in Newark. We didn't have a lot of money. We didn't go places. But when I got in the drum corps, and we started going to parades sometimes. Sometimes, some of the older guys wouldn't be there. It would be just the younger guys playing. That was a great experience. I mean, we learned a lot. We traveled to Washington, D.C., Pennsylvania. That was the first. 53. We didn't get invited to a lot of contests in New Jersey because we just weren't there yet. But then we started winning out of state, and they started inviting us. And the first big trip I had was to, Washington, D.C., Boston. And then we went to Miami and, to the Midwest. I always said, and I say to this day, we were the luckiest kids in the city of Newark. Learned a work ethic, and to boot, you make many friends and travel. That's pretty damn good. I think I was one of the luckiest guys in the world.
I've been in this drum corps since I was 11. I'll be 77 this month. So that's a lot of years. And through all these years, I met so many people, so many great people, so many influential people that it's hard to imagine my life without the drum corps. All the way through to when the corps restarted again and they tried to do a senior competing corps. I was involved with that. It didn't work. When they decided to do the alumni corps, I helped start that with Jerry Barrett and a few other people. And it's still going today. In fact, the reunion corps has been more long-lived than the competing corps. The Golden Knights have always been a very, very big part of it. My wife's a drum corps girl. She ended up teaching the 1971 and 72 color guard because the girls could relate more to a female instructor, and she was one of the best. The whole end of being in this organization, the Golden Knights, has always been a pleasure and for me, and has always been a privilege.
It is definitely a brotherhood. It's a family. I was very lucky to get in because I was not one of the Nork guys. I came in from Booton, and I was accepted into the Corps. I was young, scared to death, going into the big Corps. I had to compete with, you're talking about competition, I had to compete with 7 people for a spot in the color guard for the 1963 Corps. And that's how talented we were. And plus, everybody's talking about the drum lines. I just wanted to bring up, within the color guard itself, we had a full drum line, but there's no way with Bill Lundy on snare, there was no way we were going to migrate from the, get a spot. So there was so much talent in that Corps. I loved it. My wife kind of kids me because I say when Wildwood comes around, I want to go see my family. Well, the Corps is my family.
The better experience, if not the best experience of my life. Nothing better than the thrill and the satisfaction of seeing 100+ individuals working together, all striving for the same goal, each one sweating, nobody complaining, all dedicated to a common goal, which was to make the Corps the best it could be and hopefully win contests. My friendships go back 50+ years that I know these people, and we still see each other quite often. And even if we don't see each other for a year or two, it's like we picked up where we left off when we run into one another.
I have a long list of accomplishments in my life, from getting advanced degrees in math and working in nuclear engineering in the Navy and writing professional papers and all sorts of stuff, having a business of my own. Every single one of those things relates back to having been a Golden Knight, and all of the strategies I was taught: hold back, peak when it's important. It wasn't unusual for us to come out fairly weak at the beginning of the season, but boy, when August came, we were leaving everybody else behind. We might have been beat by Lucy's and Garfield and Blue Rock and so forth at the beginning of the season. By the time the championships rolled around, we were right up there. So it was me and my son and another guy from Drum Corps, and we put together a brass quartet and we won. And as we were preparing for it, I just went back to everything we did as Golden Knights.
Right.
My only goal in Drum Corps was to wear the black and gold. And I did that in 1969, and I still had 7 years to go. So everything, like I said earlier, everything after that was gravy. And I want to say what an honor and a pleasure it is to be in this podcast with all you great Golden Knights. And I also want to give a shout out to the Golden Knights, the guys who went to the school, who were in the Squires and marched in the Corps. I call you the Golden Knights. And if you won a national championship, you're a platinum Golden Knight. So I want to say It's a pleasure to be with you guys.
I'm involved with Carolina Crown. I have been for a number of years. And in between doing the publicity stuff and all of that, I work on a food truck. And one day I was working there, and this older guy gets on the truck and he looks at me, he says, "Oh, do you have a kid in the Corps?" I said, "No, my kids are in their 40s, He said, well, what's your connection to drum corps? I said, I was in Blessed Sacrament. He said, you were in SAC? And the guy got down on his knees and started bowing. It was the funniest thing. And I mean, people from that era, everybody remembers SAC. The highlight of anybody who was in drum corps in the 50s and 60s, the highlight of their career in drum corps was the day they beat Blessed Sacrament or came close.
Thank you, Gary, for taking the time to get this whole group together. Guys, it was so wonderful to hear your memories and your stories and to, and the thing is, I love this as a drum corps fan, like the things you're talking about, the family, what the corps meant to you. We hear that from everyone all the time. It's a really special thing we all got to do. And I love that we had this time together tonight. So Gary, thank you for making this happen. And thank you everyone for taking all this time to be here this evening to share your memories.